Welcome along to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. Yes, the Champions League is back. New format, new TV streaming services covering it in the UK and Ireland. There's a lot going on here, but I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by Mark O'Hare, Adrian, Clarke, and Miguel, Delaney, a full European team for you. So yeah, those tuning in to start with, there is a new format, Champions League, more teams, more games, hoping to get more bigger clashes in the league phase, but we'll get to that in just a second. If you're new to this, do hit that like button and follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. We much appreciate it. And unlike other podcasts, if you don't have time to watch or listen every week, Insights.match.com, full recap of all the bets. Maybe before we get into the outright, Miguel, yourself, give us a little flavor of this new format for those who aren't familiar.
Well, I mean, to a certain degree, and this is actually going to be a bit of a theme in modern football now. Basically, we're going to have our idea of a lot of the major tournaments scrambled, starting with this Champions League. So it's like even the World Cup case, we're used to 32 teams, 8 groups of 4. Well, obviously that's expanding. Now they've kept the groups of 4 because of how well it worked in the last World Cup. Whereas one of the reasons we're here is because UEFA felt that format was going stale. Now, I think that is actually a fair argument, but I don't think it was the format that was causing it to go stale. It's something we've discussed in the show before. It's basically the 15 of the 16 wealthiest clubs always got through. That's not an issue of format. So to get around that problem, rather than basically addressing it, they have come up with this after months of modeling, after all sorts of different ideas, including 4 groups of 8, 6 groups of 6. They've rested on this. And how this will work is basically, rather than split groups, all 36 teams, because there's 4 more now, go into one, you might call it a Super League, where they only play 8 games, and each of those 8 games are against different opponents. But you play 2 games each from 4 different pots. So basically, it essentially gives the chance for 2 more big games for each of the big clubs. There's no pot protection. And then once all those 8 games are played, the results are all collated into one big table. The top 8 go straight through to the last 16 in the classic format, but positions 9 to 24 go into a playoff before then. And I mean, apart from how different this is in terms of format, another thing that I actually think that's almost gone a little bit overlooked is that essentially it's a non-stop European calendar now. We're going to have 2 games in January and then on into the playoffs. I think that's very different for one. It's why I think we're seeing a lot more agitation about kind of, we saw Akanji from City the other day bring up these extra games. So it is a huge addition to the calendar in that sense. I suppose the key for us here is whether it works in terms of as a kind of a competition, as an event. And as much as I've tried to sum it up there, and as complicated as it can look, I think UEFA's hope is, from what I'm told, is that once it starts, it'll actually become easy enough to grasp because everyone will play their games, everyone knows who they've got, and then you'll start to see the league table fill up. And I mean, just from speaking to people around Europe as well, so the Romanian domestic competition uses this, and apparently it works quite well there. So it can be easy to grasp once it starts. But I suppose the proof will only be in the reality. And I do have some small caveats, like I suppose, theoretically, the idea that, this is actually another aspect of it, sorry, that when eventually they get through, there's no open draw for the last 16 anymore. It's basically a tennis-style seeding system. So, like, essentially, you could say, Rafael, Nadal, and Federer are on opposite sides of the draw. Well, if Man City and Real Madrid finish first and second, they're on opposite sides of the draw. Now, theoretically, that could keep games competitive going into the late stages, especially among those big clubs that have qualified. In reality, though, I suppose this is the key about not knowing till it actually starts. In reality, our clubs are going to be that bothered when it gets to that stage, whether they finish 4th or 5th, when they don't know who's going to be on the side of the draw. I think that's where it could start to fall down. I think where it will be most interesting will be kind of position, say, 16th to 32, and clubs like Celtic having a chance to get through. But I suppose that's not why the big clubs push for this. So it's interesting. There's a lot at stake for the Champions League itself.
And a lot in that as well. I mean, it is going to be the Europa and Conference League formats as well, and like the likes of Shamrock Rovers. There's other big clubs. Go on, Adrian. Yeah.
Can I just ask Miguel? Does ninth place play 24 and 10th place 23?
Yes, I think that's the way it works. Yeah, to keep it kind of, I suppose, to allow for. I actually need to check that, but yeah, it allows for competitiveness basically, and
all the way through.
Keep it fresh,
I must admit, I wasn't sold on this at all initially, but having seen the draw and seen the fixtures that is thrown up for the group phase, I'm kind of on board with it now, and I do think that we will get more interest towards the end, where obviously the strongest teams have done and dusted by 4 games really most years now. So they're playing dead rubbers in games 5 and 6, which has been boring, and it isn't exciting, is it? Playing, I don't know, Sturm Graz home and away. It's more interesting, I think, to play 8 different opponents. So I'm willing to give this a chance. I think it could be good fun.
Yeah, like again, similar to you, Adrian. When I saw it, wow, you get 8 different games. Even for I go back to an Irish case, we've got Shamrock Rovers in there. They've got 8 different games. One of them is Chelsea away, where they would have got just 3 opponents. None of them might have been lucrative, and they might not have gone anywhere close to qualifying. Mark, your quick thoughts, and we'll just go briefly to the outrights then. But on the new format, because were you a fan initially when it first came up?
No, and it's fair to say I'm still a little bit skeptical about it. Maybe I'm a traditionalist. I don't like a huge amount of change. And Miguel, I think, nailed the point there at the beginning when he said, the structure, there's nothing wrong with the structure. The structure is perfect for the Champions League in terms of the group stage. It's the financial disparity which is the problem, and the fact that's not being addressed. And in fact, basically, this is almost a glorified Super League. The bigger clubs getting bigger games and more of them means more money. And the bit I just can't really grasp or kind of get behind really is we're playing close to 200 league games to eliminate 12 sides. It just feels a bit unnecessary at times. But I'm prepared to give it a chance. As Adrian says, the draw has thrown up some interesting games. And, you look at some of the teams' draws compared to others, and it's very difficult. PSG have to play Girona, Arsenal, PSV, Atletico, Bayern, Salzburg, Man City, and Stuttgart. Yet Celtic, their opposition are Slovan Bratislava, Dortmund, Atalanta, Leipzig, Club Brugge, Dynamo Zagreb, Villa, and Young Boys. That's like a Conference League group. So amazing how it's kind of thrown up that way. But I did some digging, tried to do a bit of modelling and researching on this myself. And there's an account on Twitter called Football Meets Data. They've modelled the competition, done 10,000 simulations, and they reckon if you get 15 points or more, you've got a 76% chance of finishing in the top 8. 9 points is the target if you want to finish in the top 24. So there's a kind of sort of barometer or sort of points tally to sort of aim for if you want to finish in that upper echelon. So that's about 5 wins from 8 to finish in the top 8, which I felt a little bit shy. But interestingly as well, that if you look at the market, there's only 3 teams, basically 1 to 2 or 1.5 or shorter to finish in the top 8, and that's City, Real Madrid, and Arsenal. So I guess it's relatively open, but look, I'm prepared to give it a chance. I'm not a huge fan, but I think European football's got a number of problems right now, and this probably isn't number 1.
3 wins out of 8 to qualify potentially. So just win 3 of your 4 home games, perhaps for a Celtic, for example, could get them qualified very quickly. Let's look at the outright markets. It is, slightly different to Cheltenham Anti-Post betting that it's even further away. But those who like the outrights, City are 3.95 favourites, which is a bigger price than last year. I guess maybe the unknown in the competition amongst other things. And of course, Madrid being a lot shorter and better on paper, I guess, than last year, 4.6. Arsenal 10.0, Bayern 12.5. We've got Barcelona 14.0, Liverpool at 14.5, and then it's 27 bar, which starts with PSG. Adrian, briefly on Arsenal's odds, those at the top of the betting, that sort of interested you a little bit at 10.0.
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit surprised Arsenal are third favourites, but it shows the progress that's been made. Obviously, Bayern did eliminate Arsenal last season, was it at the quarterfinal stage? So yeah, it slightly surprises me, but I do think that they've got a chance here. Real Madrid can't win it every year. There might be a little bit of a regression there. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think the 2 favourites are right, obviously, City and Real Madrid. There's a lot of unknowns about City and what the vibe could be coming into the new year with the charges and whatnot. How will that impact things? Real Madrid can't keep winning it, can they, year on year? So Arsenal are the best of the rest. And I do think that having a solid defence gives you a fantastic chance of progressing deep in any competition, and Arsenal currently have an awesome defence. I don't think there's any argument about that. The away record in particular is just phenomenal, particularly domestically. I don't see any reason why they can't translate that into European competition. So yeah, if Saliba and Gabriel and Timber and White and whoever, Calafiori, if they all stay fit, Arsenal are going to be a very, very tough team to beat, especially when it gets to the knockout stages. So if you want a slightly longer shot, maybe Arsenal could be the one.
Okay, yeah, that's the one. No strong opinions from the other guys. We're going to get into the 4 games. So incidentally, each week we're going to cover 4 marquee games. This week it's Milan, Liverpool, City versus Inter, Atalanta versus Arsenal, and Atletico versus Leipzig, the Anglo-Italian Cup plus Atletico. Leipzig put in for good measure there. But before we get going, there will be a £5 podcast bet builder money back special. £5 as a free bet money back for any listeners or viewers. Stay tuned for the Manchester City versus Inter game, which is second on the list. But let's start tomorrow night, Tuesday night, 8 p.m. and take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. This will be the Amazon Prime game. Milan 4.1, Liverpool 1.97. Just moved in a little bit on screen. Draw is 3.95. Both teams score yes is 161 favourite in that market. The Asian handicap line sees Milan get a half goal head start, which is effectively double chance. 2.5 is the total. So Mark, let's start with you on this game, and where, I mean, like Liverpool under Arne Slot was all going so well, and it wasn't just necessarily the result I think would be worrying on Saturday, but probably the performance overall, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They got Nuno'd really, didn't they? It wasn't quite a smash and grab. Forest, played Liverpool and played very well against Liverpool. Arne Slot has said they made too many errors. He wasn't impressed by their chance creation. Also, were frustrated by Forest's break-up play, and also, quite interestingly, they bypassed the Liverpool press quite often, went long and caused problems that way. And so there's a few clues there for Milan if they want to try and suss out this Liverpool side, this new look Liverpool side. Milan are hefty underdogs going into this game, and perhaps after Saturday you might think they've got a decent shot here. But I'd be eager to see the Liverpool team sheet. He's known the same team now for 3 successive matches, and perhaps he will shake things up a little bit after that weekend result. But I think Liverpool have been sort of moving in the right direction. Might just be a little bit of a speed bump at the weekend. And Milan have also been, well, I wouldn't say also been suffering, because Liverpool haven't really been until the weekend, but Milan have been suffering this season. New coach, Paulo Fonseca, the transition hasn't gone very well. They did win 4-0 at the weekend against newly promoted Venezia, scored after about 20 seconds in that game. But 2 points from opening 3 games, and there's actually ultras outside the training ground, protesting against Fonseca's appointment as early as last week. So things haven't been moving swimmingly. Teo Hernandez and Rafael Leao were dropped for the match against Lazio before the international break as well. So the mood isn't quite right there at Milan right now, but it's a massive week for them. They've got this game against Liverpool and then the derby as well. So Fonseca's already admitted that that match is in his thoughts. So perhaps both teams need a reaction here. But ultimately, I want to be with Liverpool. Milan, since returning to the Champions League in 2021, I think it was, they've only won 5 of 12 home Champions League ties. Last season, we saw Newcastle come here, pick up a point. Dortmund came here and won. They did beat PSG, but I do think there's an opportunity for Liverpool to get a result here. And I think the best way to play that is to back the double chance alongside under 3.5 goals. It gives us a 2.1 shot. That's a really nice price, I think, considering the range of correct scores on our side. I think we've all seen and understood that this Liverpool side is probably a bit more soft rock than the heavy metal of Jurgen Klopp now. 4 successive games, all gone under 3.5 goals, just the 1 goal conceded. They're a bit more controlled. I just think Liverpool would be good enough to get out of San Siro with a positive result, whether that's a draw or a victory in a match that features fewer than 4 goals. So, yeah, I thought the odds against price was quite appealing there.
Okay, that's Liverpool double chance and under 3.5 goals using the bet builder at 2.1. And Adrian, you agree?
Yeah, I never look at our sheet until I've made my decisions. And first one that I looked at was on our sheet was, Mark's come for the same
copy
one.
And paste.
Yeah, exactly. but yeah, my thoughts are exactly the same. Liverpool went there in 2021 and won 2-1. Chelsea have been there, I think, since and won there. Newcastle went and got a goalless draw, didn't they? It was sort of every bit the match for Milan there. They did lose at home to Dortmund in their last Champions League home game last season, 3-1. Mark's got the numbers there, hasn't he? I think 5 wins from 12. So I think the Premier League teams, the big 3 in the Premier League, should expect to go to places like Milan and not lose for sure. So Liverpool double chance. With the unders just feels right because I think that Milan have not defended particularly well this season. They conceded 6 against Torino, Parma, and Lazio, 2 in each of those games, and I think that has to provoke a reaction from within. Where, especially when you're just about to play Liverpool, it's like, boys, come on, we have got to be solid here today. So I think there'll be a heavy focus on solidity, and then maybe going quite long at times into whoever plays up front. It could be is it Tammy Abraham? It could be Tammy Abraham, could be Morata, one of those two guys. So we'll see. But I think Liverpool under Slot, more control, less urgency to keep score, to score every 5 minutes. I think this would be a controlled performance, and they should absolutely come away with either a win or at worst a draw Liverpool. But I don't see it escalating. So yeah, double chance Liverpool and under 3.5.
Okay, yeah, that's the bet from the two guys. Miguel, you're under similar lines in terms of the under, I guess. Tell us a little bit about the differences between Klopp and Slot after 4 games. Is it pretty much what's been documented in the sense that it's just a bit more of a controlled approach?
Oh, actually, I think there's even more than that. And sorry, I have just turned off my WhatsApp notifications there. The city hearing session.
Busy day. It's a busy day, Miguel.
I thought it was just abuse from the punters for us. But yeah,
I mean, I think there's two things really, and actually, Mo Salah did an interview about this before the before the Man United game, which I found really interesting. Which was basically, I suppose, he was talking about how they both build play in a completely different way, and that building play or construction of play is also based on a totally different interpretation of pressing, which is much closer to the Guardiola approach. You essentially have the classic positional game in that sense. Whereas obviously, I mean, Klopp's theories and applications of counter pressing is well known, even if I think it did evolve over the years. And I think there's an element of Guardiola and Klopp influencing each other. But from the way Salah was speaking, from what I saw in the one game this season where I watched Liverpool live, which was that Manchester United game, and I think that did have a little bit more of a hybrid approach just because of the way United play as well, and how Liverpool evidently targeted Casemiro. But when you actually break it down like that, it is actually completely different to Klopp, really. It's almost, I don't want to go as far as saying ideologically opposed, but certainly it's much further down a spectrum, especially if we have kind of in modern football where, say, it used to be Guardiola and Mourinho as opposites. The way the game has evolved, where that sort of Mourinho reactive football isn't really played at the top level anymore, and it has almost become that. The Klopp counter press on one side and Guardiola pressing possession on the other side. And I think Slot much more leans to the Guardiola side. I think we've seen that so far, and I think that is why it's why the weekend was very interesting. Maybe not if you're a Liverpool fan, but it feels to me it's going to be one of those situations where 70 to 80% of the time, Liverpool are going to be fine and enact Slot's approach, especially because they've got high quality players. But because it's still so early in the stages, and maybe it'll be a little bit like, say, Guardiola's first season at City in 2016-17, where suddenly it's just games where it kind of just short circuits a bit because the players aren't fully in tune. Now, to be fair, I do think at the weekend, Nuno had a big say in that. And Nuno's a coach that's been criticised for his own football in the past, but he's good at this sort of game, which is basically, it is almost like classic Mourinho against Barcelona in 2010. Keep it tight, a very low block. Like in the first half, he didn't even have any of his pacey players on. Then second half, brings the pacey players on in Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, and suddenly there are those openings. So that is a potential route for Milan. I don't think it's one they're going to pursue. And I mean, I think I broadly agree with the lads. If you stand back, even allowing for the weekend, I think there's always a danger in these situations to get too influenced by the last result, and that includes Milan's heavy win. I think Liverpool, just standing back, they should win 1-0, 2-0. I do wonder whether, because it's going to the San Siro, because it's Slot's first game at Liverpool in the Champions League, whether this could be one of those occasions you see, especially given for all that's happened in the modern history of the two clubs. It is still a game between giants. This was 2 Champions League finals in the last 20 years. And sometimes in those sort of occasions, in a very first Champions League game, they can just be sort of sedate affairs as teams kind of feel themselves out. And I do wonder, and I suppose this is something we're going to talk about a lot today, whether the new format will actually influence this, because it's going to change how teams approach. Because usually we would have seen that in the classic group stage, teams knew to just get your points on the board soon enough, then that should be fine. Unless it was maybe an away game and even more restrained, which is I think what I'm talking about here in terms of these more sedate affairs. But with this, it's a bit of a, will there be an element of kind of like, just get a point to get yourself on the board early? Will it lead to a bit more conservative football early on? I think that's again something we won't know until the reality as it's played. And just for that reason, even though I fancy a Liverpool 1-0, 2-0, I've just gone for a low-scoring game under 2.5, just to cover the possibility that this could be a 0-0.
Okay, yeah, that's in around 2.54. So that's Miguel's pick. We'll lock in the market agent selection. Liverpool double chance and under 3.5 goals. I have to face those lads every Thursday. So to go with you, Miguel, on that first game would have been a nail in my coffin for sure. Well, let's move on to the £5 money back as a free bet special. This is going to be on this game. But Manchester City versus Inter. Quick look at the betting. City 157 favourites at home to Inter, who are 6.6. The draw is 4.7. Both teams to score, yes, is favoured at around 1.79. Inter getting a 1-goal head start in the Asian handicap. 2.5 is the total. Adrian, what did you make of City Brentford for 20 minutes? Pep Guardiola described it one of his worst ever team performances with any club, which I thought was and it took it, I guess, a deflected goal, albeit it was a good strike from Haaland to get them back into it.
Yeah, it could have been 3 or 4 down, couldn't they? It was, remarkably sluggish start. The same obviously happened against Ipswich where they conceded early. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that there's cause for major concern, but they've not completely nailed it as yet, have they, Manchester City? And Inter Milan might go to the Etihad and think, you know what, this is one of our sort of top tier matches. Let's go for it. You know, what have we got to lose? That might be the attitude, particularly early on in the game, looking to catch Manchester City cold. I actually think that is a tactic that more and more teams probably should apply, even though it normally ends in defeat. The better teams, if they can take an early lead, should be able to help them rather than hinder. So yeah, let's see what happens here. They're not fully functioning, but when you've got Haaland playing like he is, then you're going to be favourites for any match, aren't you? So yeah, I would have to side with Manchester City here. Yeah, you have to really in every home game. But I do think Inter can make it interesting. They scored in all 4 of their away games in the Champions League last year, Inter Milan, and look, you got Thuram up front. I think he's stylistically quite well suited to maybe hurting a team like Manchester City on the break. Lautaro Martinez doesn't need that many chances to score quite often. He's such a good finisher. So I think that they've got guys up front that can carry a threat. And they've got a little bit of pace there with Thuram, haven't they? City, we know that they don't keep that many clean sheets. It normally doesn't matter because they score so many goals. Last season, for example, in the Champions League, 5 home games, just 1 home clean sheet, actually. And that was against the young boys. So I can see both teams scoring here, absolutely. City scored 3 in every home game last season in the Champions League until Real Madrid came to Manchester, and we know what happened there with a 1-0 draw and then the defeat on penalties. So, yeah, I think City have enough to win the game, but I do think that the Inter have the capability to score. As you know, certainly if Ipswich can score and Brentford can score and create a lot of chances, then so can Inter Milan. So, yeah, I think the odds are quite nice on this, considering how many times this lands domestically and in Europe for Manchester City home games. It's a home win, and both teams to score 3.1.
And you're in full agreement with this, Miguel?
Yes, I am. I mean, obviously there's so much around this game, given that actually, and this happens a lot in this group stage. I suppose part of the point over here, it's yet another replay of a recent final.
Yeah.
I do think that was obviously a narrow game that people will look to. I think that the narrowness of that game, as well as interplayed, was more down to the occasion for City, the tension that they'd never won it before, and that can happen in that sort of match. I thought Inter, while a good team who you wouldn't want to meet, they were obviously amplified or kind of maybe boosted through what was a more forgiving run. I think last season was perhaps closer to the reality. And I mean, I have to say, like, this is one of those where I was actually thinking about going for correct score where I haven't. Whereas I'd almost be immediately looking at this and thinking City 3-1, a fairly easy win. Just they do cough up a few goals, but especially with Haaland in this sort of form, I mean, it's even beyond 2 years ago. I suppose this is another thing. It shows the benefit of a rest, given that we're talking about the calendar. Given he didn't go into the tournament, or he didn't have a tournament in the summer. So yeah, I'm this at 3.1. This seems so favourable. Man City and both teams to score.
Yeah, I do think a big part of that is his summer off and coming and hitting the ground running. He's scored 9 goals in the Premier League. Mark, next best is Chelsea with 8 goals, which I think says it all about where he is at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen and said it all before, really, about Erling Haaland. It's just an astonishing numbers we've never really seen before in the Premier League. So I'm not as strong on City as the lads. I certainly can see their thinking and can back them up. I don't expect Inter to win, obviously, but I think they can be competitive in this game and keep it relatively close. A lot of faith in Simone Inzaghi in these particular fixtures. We know he's a bit of a cup specialist and he's a very good manager at sort of getting his team, as the guys have talked about with Nuno against Liverpool, to be to formulate a plan and get those players to enact that plan to his best of ability. And I think he's a very smart guy, and I think Inter are a tricky team to see off. So I also agree that both teams to score should be on the agenda here. I'm just going to take BTTS as a single, really, at 178. I think that's a really nice price. Actually, I was considering backing into on the handicap with a 1.25 goal start, a similar-ish price, but this feels like the safer option. Just need Inter to score. We expect City to score, as they always do. But I'm going to take the stat that Adrian had there about Man City's Champions League just a little bit further from last season. In all 10 of their Champions League ties last season, both teams to score landed in 9 of them. The only game it didn't was that clean sheet against Young Boys at the Etihad when they won 3-0. In the Premier League last season, against the top 14 at the Etihad, they conceded in 11 of 13 matches. So this, despite being this all-conquering team, they do concede goals. We've seen it happening against Ipswich, West Ham and Brentford now in 3 successive Premier League matches. And, you know, Inter aren't often involved in shootouts, especially the big games, but they will be looking to exploit that space. Adrian's touched on it. Thuram has been especially good so far this season. Lautaro's finishing. Çalhanoğlu's ability from range, the set-piece threat as well. I think Inter score here, and therefore I think BTTS is a big runner. I wouldn't read too much into their result against Monza on Sunday when Inzaghi did make a few changes. Their eyes were on this match and on this week. As I said with Milan, there is a derby to come at the weekend. But yeah, I think they'll come here and give it a good go. But yeah, in terms of City, they will get better. You know, Rodri hasn't even started a match yet this season, and we saw how many problems they had last year. John Stones and Kyle Walker have started just one each as well. Phil Foden's not even been there. They're going to get better. I just hope it's not this midweek.
Okay, Mark, a bit more cautious on the City win, but majority rules. So we're locking City and both teams to score, which is 3.1. If you want to boost that to 3.9 on the matchbook bet builder, you can get 3.9, and that is our £5 money back as a free bet special. All you have to do is bet this. You can see your profit there, getting almost £20 in return. If it loses, though, you will get your money back as a free bet on Thursday morning. So well, we're checking that out. If you have a matchbook account, that is for new and existing customers, risk-free as well. Let's move on to Thursday night games. Now, this is a one-off for the Champions League, so I know there'll be a few questions on that. Why are these teams playing on Thursday night? But let's take a look at the betting. Atalanta versus Arsenal. Atalanta 4.1 underdogs to Arsenal, who are odds on 194. Draw is 3.8. Both teams to score, yes, 169. No is 2.26. The Asian handicap line sees Atalanta get a half goal start at 2.02. And the total is 2.5. Adrian, take it away. I mean, we got Arsenal wrong in the end on Sunday, unfortunately, or fortunately for some. But this is a tricky tie. I know they will have Declan Rice back as well, obviously.
Yeah, I just did Tottenham double chance as a jinx bet, to be honest. So yeah,
expect it every week now.
It was impressive from Arsenal. I really enjoyed the collective effort. You know, this team loves defending, and they're obsessed by keeping clean sheets, and that is such a healthy ingredient to have within your squad. And that's why I think, you know, they are contenders in every competition that they go for. This is a tricky game, obviously. Atalanta, winners of the Europa League, how brilliant weren't they when beating Leverkusen in that final. I do like the football. It's high risk, but it's also high reward sometimes for them. It's not an easy game. I can actually see the pattern of the game potentially being quite similar. It might be that Arsenal allow Atalanta onto them a little bit, look to close up, be compact, keep that clean sheet, frustrate them, and then look to pick off Atalanta on the break. Atalanta have the highest XG in Serie A after 4 games, such an attack-minded side, but they had the second worst expected goals against in Serie A after 4 games. They're giving up chances. They're giving up goals. They've scored 8. They're let in 8. So that will be a concern, I think, for Gasperini, that Arsenal might pick them off. In Europe, funnily enough, at home, Atalanta haven't been as swashbuckling. They've been involved. I think I looked at 6 home games last season in the Europa League. 4 of those 6 went under 2.5, and the others didn't exactly get out of hand either. So I'm looking to maybe oppose goals here. We know that Arsenal are brilliant at keeping clean sheets on the road. 9 clean sheets in their last 10 in the Premier League, of course. And they don't score that many away from home either, Arsenal. Just looking back to last season, their last 3 matches all went under 2.5 goals. They failed to score in Porto, failed to score against Bayern, got 1 at PSV, 1 at Lens, and 2 in the win at Sevilla. So Arsenal, I think, will play quite a cagey game here. Look to maybe not use up too much energy ahead of that game against City at the weekend. So I think this is going to be tighter than expected. So as a consequence, I'm going to look at the odds and play under 2.5 goals at 2.18. I also think Arsenal might make 1 or 2 changes for the game, with City being the priority here. So yeah, I think neither manager wants to turn this into a particularly end-to-end match, which will in turn maybe lead to a more cagey game than some expect.
Yeah, big few days for Arsenal coming up over the next. So yeah, team selection will be critical. Mark, you're broadly in agreement, I guess, with the unders here as well.
Yeah, it's a tricky game because that Man City match on Sunday is so enormous. We just don't know how Arsenal are going to come into this match. We expect Declan Rice to come straight back into that midfield, but where are the changes going to be elsewhere? Is this the priority? Probably not, but we have to assume it is. It does look a little bit, not quite, but almost a bit like Beauty and the Beast, really. Atalanta, this expressive, free-flowing, attack-minded side against what seems to be just an impenetrable Arsenal defence, especially when they go on the road. The numbers and the data is just incredibly impressive since the start of this calendar year, if not further, really. So they're not particularly flashy when they go away from Emirates Stadium, but they're bloody effective and they're very difficult to oust. So I just think they'll be a little bit too smart for Atalanta, as they were for Spurs, really. Atalanta did do a job on Liverpool last season in the Europa League. They did do a job on Leverkusen in the big game too, and they showed they can shapeshift a little bit when required. But I think being in Bergamo, this is a big game for them, and they'll fancy their chances, considering Arsenal might have their eyes elsewhere. So I just think Arsenal will look to lock it down, shut it down, be difficult to play against, and keep their opposition at arm's length. I don't think Arteta or Arsenal will really care if they come away with a 0-0 draw. Almost job done, if you like. So Atalanta will bring the noise in forward areas, but as Adrian said, defensively they are a bit all over the place at the minute, shall we say. Even at the weekend, the 3-2 winning against Fiorentina, they were a bit of a rabble defensively, and Gasperini spoke after the game about his frustration, really. They did a lot of late business in the transfer window, then with an international break as well. He's not had a lot of chance to work with his players, and he said you can see that in the opening weekends because they've made so many individual errors and systematic errors as well, leading to goals. They were stuffed 4-0 away into not long ago, dreadful in that match, and then started really poorly against Torino as well in that defeat, and made too many basic errors too. So they've been a bit wasteful in forward areas and mistake-ridden defensively too. So I think Arsenal double chance, and under 3.5 goals at 191, again with a range of correct scores on your side is a nice price to take here.
Okay, yeah, Miguel, anything to add on that? I guess it's going to follow a similar pattern, what the guys said to perhaps yesterday's game.
Yeah, totally. I was at the game yesterday and was so struck. I mean, it's something actually worth talking about, especially in this wider discussion that I suppose we touched on at the start about who could win it this season, and Adrian being surprised and Arsenal being so high. I actually am not that surprised, because I think at this point we probably got to talk about Arsenal as the best defence in Europe, which is, and I think having had the experience of the Champions League last season, or maybe in terms of little things like some game management, even players adapting to the stage, like in that Bayern Munich game, they'll be over that this season. And like I was talking to someone quite prominent at Spurs at halftime yesterday, who immediately kind of went, this is a worry, because even though Spurs started well, you can just see with Arsenal, they know what they're about. And there has been that sense of a team that's kind of growing into that. I think that's could be very influential in Europe. And a game like this, I expect to follow the same pattern. Again, partly down to the idea of expending energy before Sunday, partly out of the necessity, and also partly because of how Atlanta play. And it was one thing that struck yesterday as well, which was, I suppose this is relevant with Atlanta, if maybe a little bit more so defensively, but also in terms of how they construct their attack, where they'll be up. They try to get opposition defenders in situations where on one-on-ones, which is exactly what Spurs tried to do to Arsenal yesterday, especially out wide. But one thing that was so conspicuous with Arsenal is how anytime anyone was in that sort of situation, because of the way they'd set up, there was often 2, if not 3 players immediately shutting out the space, especially late in the game. I expect this to be very similar. And I think, my gut is really, I'd be going both teams to score no, or I was close to picking Adrian's under 2.5, but I'm going to go for Arsenal and both teams scoring no. I think it will be a 1-0 Arsenal win. But, I suppose as happens in these sort of games, if they get 1, then suddenly the potential to get 2 or 3 on the break. And again, that's also influenced the other side, the fact that Atalanta have just had a few issues this season. I think that's both due to recruitment and also maybe a little bit, and because we shouldn't overlook these things, maybe a little bit of a psychological hangover just from how last season ended and how great it was.
Yeah, there always tends to be that no matter what club you are. 3.25 is the price of that bet from Miguel, incidentally, at around 9-4. We'll go with Adrian on this under 2.5 goals, 2.18. I need to see it from Arsenal away in Europe on a consistent basis before maybe siding with them. Let's move on to the final game, Atletico versus Leipzig, to spice it up, a non-English game, which is always nice. Apologies to Villa fans. Atletico 1.77, Leipzig 4.7. The draw 3-1 or 4.0. Leipzig are getting a 3/4 goal head start. Both teams to score yes is 171, and the goal line here is 2.5 overs at 173. So yeah, Miguel, take it away on your take on Diego Simeone. Obviously, from an English point of view, Conor Gallagher's joined, he gets a goal, so he's up and running. So where do you see the side going, and what are their ambitions this season?
So it almost feels like with Atletico that at this point, especially given there's this kind of ongoing debate over Simeone's own style, it almost feels like they have a kind of a rebrand almost every single summer. And like it feels like every year we're talking about how much Simeone has deviated from his instinct, whether they always have, and I suppose this goes back to when they were a really top team in terms of twice qualifying in Champions League finals, but they always had a huge turnover of players, which probably fed into that. Now that turnover has so far led into a relatively high-scoring start to the season with 9 goals. And I think being at home, and I've been in that stadium for these sort of games, it has managed to recreate that kind of effect of the Calderon. So it does feel like, allied to Simeone's approach to these games, there's a little bit of a kind of emotional momentum behind Atletico at the moment. And with Leipzig in these sort of games, although they've had a relatively solid start to the season, I don't know how many times you've seen them where they've gone away in these sort of matches and frozen a little bit. Like I remember a classic. Now, this was under Nagelsmann, so it is a different era, but obviously there's such continuity under Leipzig that when they went to Old Trafford to Solskjaer's United and lost 5-0, and weirdly, partly see the same sort of thing happening here. That's maybe a bit harsh, but it's, I suppose, maybe the influence of memory in that sense, and also kind of the way these teams are constructed. But I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to go for Atletico, and maybe deviating from some of the others here, both teams to score no. I think Atletico can score, but I think they still have that capacity to close out teams. I think maybe their football perhaps suits how Leipzig will play. So yeah, but it was one of these, another kind of borderline decision, this one.
Yeah, so like no spoilers here, but like guys are predominantly going with Atletico here. Mark, you're pairing it with the over 1.5 goals. Similar question to what I asked Miguel. What do you make of what this team can do this season?
Good question. I'm not sure. I'm hoping they can push the big two at least closer in the domestic title race. In Europe, I still think they're probably a couple of notches below elite level, but we know with Simeone, they do have a track record of being able to go deep into these competitions and being a real thorn in sides in the sides of opposition teams. They are still the type of team who you draw in a knockout phase, and you probably wince a little bit because you know it's not going to be easy. So I guess that's an asset for them. But yeah, they're moving along quite nicely in Spain so far, unbeaten, 4 successive clean sheets now as well. Another new look side coming together quite nicely. It didn't look that way back in sort of May, June, when they seemed to get rid of almost half of their squad, but they've recruited brilliantly, invested pretty well. Yeah, Sunday night they were pretty routine winners against a admittedly poor Valencia side, but yeah, they're feeling quite good about themselves, and this might be a good time to play a Leipzig team who have gone through, I guess, a similar transition. They've done a lot of recruitment, a lot of good business too, but I think they'll improve as the season goes on. They're sitting in third in the Bundesliga table right now, but I think that's a false position based on the performances we've seen across their first 3 games. They did win away at Leverkusen, which is the big sort of headline story, really. But then, didn't really fire against Bochum or Union at home, especially at the weekend. But yeah, if you look at the Bundesliga rankings, only 2 teams have averaged a lower XG output from open play than Leipzig. Only 3 teams have had fewer shots in the box, and only St. Pauli have had fewer shots on target across the first 3 games. And if you look at that Leverkusen win, yeah, brilliant on paper, 3-2 away from home. But one of the goals was an absolute screamer from 30 yards. They lost a shot count 26-8. The shots in the box count read 18-5. So perhaps a little bit of lady luck on their side in that particular game. And I'm not sure they're going to get it from Atletico, because at the Metropolitano, this team just knows what to do and what's required to get results. Their home record has been remarkably strong now for good on sort of 12 months. The last 39 games across all competitions, they've actually won 33 of those, which is similar lines of what Man City would be doing. 27 of those 33 wins, they scored at least twice. So that's why I'm combining the win alongside over 1.5 goals, just excluding the 1-0 correct score. It gets us an even money shot. It won in all 5 of Atletico's home Champions League ties last season, including against Dortmund, including against Inter Milan. And whilst Leipzig's away Champions League results look okay on paper, they do tend to struggle when stepping up in class, and I would put Atletico in that category too. So I know they're not quite Real Madrid or Man City, but they are a menace in Madrid, and I fancy them to win the game and score at least twice.
Okay, that's 2.0 over 1.5 goals, along with the Atletico win. And Adrian, you're slightly different in that Atletico win, but expecting it to be a lively game, so both teams will score, yes.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I do like Mark's pick. I do. Well, I like both the picks because they're very well presented. But if you want to stretch the odds a little bit, Atletico and both teams to score, it comes in at 3.15. It's Leipzig's record away from home, really, in Europe that makes me think that they might be able to offer something up here. They got 8 goals in 4 away matches in the Champions League last season. They scored at Man City. They scored at the Bernabeu as well. So, they're capable. And look at the names they've got. You've got Openda, you've got Seshko, you've got Xavi Simons. They've got players that are more than capable, I think, of scoring a goal. But I don't see Atletico lose it. I mean, 5 straight wins at home in the Champions League, 10 unbeaten at home in the Champions League. Domestically, they are keeping a lot of clean sheets at the moment as well, not giving much away. It's one of the toughest away games in the competition. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I just give Leipzig a chance of getting one on the board with the talent that they've got. But Atletico ultimately winning the game by scoring 2 or more goals in front of their own fans, which is something, as Mark said, that they're used to doing. So yeah, Atletico and both teams score is a bigger price if you want to push the boat out at 3.15.
Okay, yeah, so Adrian or Miguel, if you want the bigger price, we'll lock in the safer option, Atletico. And over 1.5 goals, 2.0. Incidentally, Atletico's outright price around 34.0, Leipzig 85.0, perhaps showing the gulf between the two teams. Insights.matchbook.com, full recap of all those main game picks and the picks coming up here. So, look, Mark, we'll start with you. You've got 2 in this section, but maybe save the other one for your best bet time. But take it away. You picked out a couple of games where you see plenty of goals.
Yeah, the glamour tie on Wednesday. It's an early kickoff. Sparta Prague against RB Salzburg. Expecting goals, expecting entertainment. Going to get involved with over 2.5 goals in BTTS around about the 183 mark. You can back over 2 3/4 goals if you want on the Asian line, but that won't get you paid in full if you back the 2. If the game ends in a 2-1, so I do prefer the overs and BTTS combination. Both stand out really for me. Salzburg. Goals, just rinse and repeat, really. It's a tried and trusted formula in Europe or it has tended to be over the last sort of 5-6 years. Pep Lijnders now, the head coach there, Klopp's former assistant. So a tricky enough start, actually. They were beaten Rapid Vienna before the international break 3-2. But they did squeeze through to relatively tight and tough qualifiers against FC Twente and Dynamo Kiev to get this far. So you look at his opening 8 league and Champions League games, both sides have scored in 6 of those, sort of continuing that theme for Salzburg's games being quite goal heavy. And then you've got Sparta Prague, who I think, like Salzburg, will be targeting sort of a top 24 finish. And I think that's got the, in theory, both sides should be going at it because they'll see this as winnable matches against each other rather than sort of a pot 1 or pot 2 team. So in that regard, we should get an open, attack-minded game. But Sparta have been a pretty solid outfit for a while now, and they've started the season incredibly well. They had to start back in mid-July with the Champions League qualifiers. They played 13 games across all comps. They've won 11 of those. They're unbeaten, and they've scored at least twice in 12 of those 13 as well. Lucas Rashlin, who performed so well for Slovakia in the Euros, has been a key figure for them recently too. So I think they're bound to be a threat in Prague, and but I think Salzburg will go there with a remit to try and get on the score sheet and cause some problems too. So I think we've got 2 front foot sides who will see this as a very winnable opportunity, and therefore I think we should be able to get some goals in the game. So overs and BTDS are 183.
Okay, and stay tuned for Mark's best bet, which is the same bet in a different game where he sees a lot of goals. Adrian, when we play our weekly, will John Duran start front for Aston Villa, or what's going on? Because him and Ollie ended up finishing the game together, and he scored that incredible goal, incredible comeback. Albeit it was probably the most obvious comeback when they went 2-0 poor Everton. But anyway, take it away with your bet on Villa. They're the early kickoff on Tuesday.
Yeah, I read that piece for the Premier League. It's remarkable the numbers around John Duran. He is so prolific as a sub. He deserves really to start. But I just don't see Duran and Watkins starting that many games together. If he can find a way for that to work, it could be transformative for them, because he is the real deal, I think, at just 20 years of age, John Duran. I wanted to include Villa because, we didn't want to leave them out. And I've got to be honest, when I thought about this game, the more I looked into it, the more I thought I might oppose them here. Young boys score at home in Europe all the time. Well, actually, just in the Champions League, 15 games in a row at home, they've scored in Europe. They've nabbed 2 or more in 11 of those 15 young boys. So they are a team that, albeit in those fixtures, a lot of the time they're not facing a team without Aston Villa's quality, but they have done along the way. They've played Man United, they've played Villarreal, they've played good teams, and they almost always score, or they have always scored. And both teams to score has landed in 13 of those 15 home games in Europe as well for young boys. So I really like both teams to score here, because I don't think Villa are impenetrable by any stretch. Look at the chances they gave up against Everton. Defensively, they're not really at it, are they, at the moment? They're not as good as they were if you rewind the clock kind of 6 months or further back under Unai Emery. They're nowhere near as solid as they were. And in terms of sort of looking at young boys, I'm going to go with them with a double chance, a young boys double chance, and both teams to score, which comes out at 3.1. Villa in Europe last year, they got beat at Lille to, letting 2 goals there. They let in 2 goals at Olympiacos. They actually conceded in it. If you look at them in all competitions, they've conceded in 8 of their last 9 away games, Villa. The exception being that blooming match against Arsenal, where they somehow ruined Arsenal's title dreams with that 2-0 win. They've been conceding on the road in other matches. In the Conference League last year, the only away clean sheets were kept at Hibs, which I think was a qualifier, and then against Ajax, which was a goalless draw. In all of the other games, and they were playing teams that are probably weaker than young boys, they still conceded. So, I give young boys a shot at this. I think they'll score 1. They might get 2, in which case I really like this pick, which is young boys double chance of both teams to score, 3.1.
Good news, Villa fans, we got to cover the game. The bad news, Adrian thinks you're under massive pressure tomorrow evening, so you know where he is on Twitter if you want to get to him. Miguel, I had I guess the fortune of tuning into the Bundesliga opening game for Bayern, and I was watching Ralf Hasenhüttl against Vincent Kompany on the sidelines, and Wolfsburg versus Bayern Munich. I mean, how did we get here? Vincent Kompany's managing Bayern, Harry Kane scoring hat-tricks at the weekend. How's he been doing the first 3 games?
I mean, it's interesting. I actually had an interview with Kane. Well, I say an interview the day before the England match, because it was Kane's 100th appearance. The FA put him up for like a chat with a few of the written press. So like this was beyond the press conference. He's sitting down with us and essentially talking about his career and proving people wrong. What was more interesting about it was actually when he went into kind of the idea of finishing, and particularly the whole idea of how you coach finishing, because this is actually something that's been discussed a lot in the modern game, whenever we're losing kind of that sort of the ruthless strikers. And Kane was actually putting some of it down to how almost unrealistic a lot of modern finishing drills are, and how he tries to make it as realistic as possible. I suppose the long and short of this being how we were talking to and about a forward in form, as you say. He is scoring hat-tricks again. He looks sharp for England, albeit against Finland. But I mean, you only have to look at some of Kane's performances in the Euros to see the kind of the other side of that, and it isn't necessarily about the opposition. He himself feels more in tune with himself. And just, touching on this game, I suppose, I mean, it was one that I immediately looked at. Whatever about Bayern's form at any given moment, given what they've been for the past decade, they are one of those clubs, if they've got a comfortable game at home, they can suddenly just cut loose. And for that, when I saw this new format, new season, Kane scoring, Dynamo Zagreb, I feared for them. So I've gone for an over 4.5, because Bayern do just have that capacity to suddenly just unleash. Just to pick up one on something there, we're talking about Villa as well. I think Villa are very interested in this Champions League campaign, especially given that Emery has been a cup specialist, right? A European knockout specialist, albeit at the second tier in the Europa League. But obviously, the way he qualified for the Champions League this season, the Premier League, suggested a step up. His tactics are different. And it's going to be interesting. Let's not forget as well, he had that one superb Champions League season with Villarreal as well, just before he went to Villa. So from that perspective and how he approaches it, I'm quite intrigued by how Villa do. I was a little bit down in Villa last season, but I've been impressed with from how they did last season. I've been impressed with Emery's evolution. And I don't want to call them dark horses or anything like that, but it's more, I'm very interested in how they'll do in it.
Yeah, again, this new format, it'll all probably make sense in terms of, but like, you can do very little and still be in the knockout stages. So the Champions League could bring a lot of teams into it. But yeah, Miguel expecting plenty of goals. Bayern Zagreb over 4.5 at 2.98. Let's see how that gets on. We'll move on to long shot time and maybe bring it back to you, Miguel. Correct score, if you were to have one. I mean, Real Madrid open that campaign, a lot going on. Mbappe, I mean, the pressure's on him to win a Champions League with Madrid. That's what they do every season, basically.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, it's a bit like when Pep Guardiola went to Bayern Munich after he won the treble, isn't it?
Yeah, it's over. You can't do it. Yeah.
You point this figure who's like you've been after for so long, but then you've just done what you want, what you signed him for.
There's no way he was cheering for Real Madrid in that final last year. There's just no way.
Yeah, but he wanted to be the hero and deliver it.
Yeah.
And look, with a long shot like this, I suppose all you can do with long shots, really. So these are more based on gut than anything else. And Madrid at home to Stuttgart, 3-1 just feels almost the ultimate Madrid score in this sort of game. I've seen these matches with Madrid, especially early in the competition when they're not quite at it. Let's not forget they lost to Sheriff a few years ago. But they can be vulnerable, but then just get it together in that Madrid way. So you can see a game where Stuttgart shocked them by going 1-0 up in the first 20. Madrid kind of leave it a bit late in the last half hour. They just get one, then get two more. So yeah, 3-1.
Let's lock it in.
Out at me.
11.0 currently on Matchbook. Mark, if there is to be a shock for Matchday 1, you think you found it here?
Maybe. I'm going to be with Red Star Belgrade against Benfica, about 4.3 on Matchbook. This is as much a bet against Benfica as it is pro Red Star. Benfica have already sacked Roger Schmidt. That was done before the international break. They scored a very dubious kind of stoppage time penalty to scrape a point against Moreirense in his final game, and that was the final straw, really. Wasn't a huge surprise. Benfica hadn't looked the same side that won the title in his first season for quite some time, and the supporters haven't been very happy, not just with him, but also the hierarchy as well. And they finished 10 points off the pace last season. domestically. Sporting knocked them out of the cup and regressed in the Champions League as well. So, they needed a bit of a change, but they were hoping to get Leonardo Jardim in. They didn't. They've now got Bruno Lage in, which was quite an underwhelming appointment for Benfica supporters. And he started with a routine home win at the weekend, but there are tougher tests awaiting. And Red Star might be it. We know about the sort of hotbed atmosphere they have there in Belgrade. They'll bring the noise, I think, on the pitch as well. They're absolutely superb. When I saw them against Bodo Glimt in the final qualification match, they were sort of behind on aggregate going into that second leg, and they overturned that deficit and some. Really, they largely dominated that match. And last season, I remember them kind of giving Leipzig and Man City two really good runs for their money in Belgrade. They lost both games 2-1 and 3-2 respectively, but they showed they're capable, and I think they can cause Benfica problems. Basically, I just wouldn't go anywhere near back in Benfica at odds on. So I'm quite happy to support Red Star as a big underdog at home.
Okay, yeah, against Benfica more so maybe than pro Red Star, but good case from Mark 4.3. Adrian, this could be a fun game, and it's going to lead into Mark's best bet as well. But Feyenoord versus Leverkusen, take it away.
I think so, yeah. Look, it's just looking to identify possible upsets. It's not easy when we don't know how teams are going to approach this new format or not. But Leverkusen, is there a sense of the second season syndrome? They've been beaten already by Leipzig. The goals have been flowing. The chances have been flowing, but so too have the concessions. They're letting in goals for fun, really. Leipzig got a couple, 3, and Mönchengladbach got a couple. Most games it seemed to be quite chaotic for Leverkusen. They got themselves over the line most of the time last year, but as their luck ran out a touch, I don't know. Let's see. But what I do know is that Feyenoord away is a tough game. It's a really intimidating. It's an old school ground. I love it, and it's not an easy atmosphere. And I know that Feyenoord have lost their manager in Slot, and they're starting again. I don't think they've had a brilliant start to this season, but they've still got good players. Still got their main striker, Santiago Jimenez, up front. They beat Celtic and Lazio in the group stage on home turf last season as well. So, yeah, I just think that they've got a shot at it. I do. They've got a goal scorer at the top end of the pitch. They will make it hostile. This might be the night where they get their new regime under Prisk going. And at 6.0 for Feyenoord and both teams to score, I just like the punt, really. Both teams to score in any Leverkusen game. It just feels right, doesn't it? And just as a point of interest, Feyenoord in every game so far this season, both teams to score has landed. So yeah, 6.0 for Feyenoord, and that to happen.
Mark, best bet time, and probably Adrian stole maybe half your stats you're going to use for this bet here.
He's done all the hard work for me, really. Yeah, I'm going to back both teams to score and over 2.5 goals, 183. So both sides to score and just get a third goal. I don't really care who gets it. But I agree. I think Feyenoord have got a shot here. They coughed up a 2-0 at Groningen at the weekend. So have now drawn 3 of their opening 4 games in the Eredivisie. But as Adrian says, both sides have scored in all 4. They started the season with a Super Cup game against PSV, drew that game 4-4. So they're well accustomed to goals at both ends. And I think at De Kuip they'll be up for it. They come alive on these kind of European nights. And I saw at least 2 of their games last season at home in the Champions League, and they were bang up for those games against Celtic and Atletico when they lost 3-1. Actually, they were much better than that final score suggested. So, I think they'll give Leverkusen some difficult moments, but ultimately, I think Leverkusen in forward areas are just difficult to contain. Boniface back amongst the goals at the weekend. Terrier has settled really superbly since his move from France. You've got Florian Wirtz there, Patrick Schick off the bench. Frimpong wasn't fit enough to start at Hoffenheim at the weekend, but came off the bench, and they still won that game 4-1. So they will be strong. And you look at their results this season, starting with the Super Cup, it's 2-2, 2-3, 2-3, 1-4. So they've now scored twice or more, Leverkusen, in 29 of the last 37 matches across all competitions. So you fully expect them to make their mark, but I think they will concede as well, and we just need a third goal to top it off. So, yeah, looking forward to this game. It's I think it's an early kickoff on Thursday. Should be one to watch.
5:45, those early kickoffs, incidentally. These are games we covered, but Miguel, your best bet on the card this week?
Yeah, again, I wavered on a few of these, but I just think this kind of falls under my original bet, but I just think it's safer because of how I think we can be almost guaranteed that Arsenal will set up, which is playing close to their own goal, relying on that defence, which, as you said, is maybe the best in Europe now, maybe one that can go the distance in the Champions League. And rather than kind of add it to Arsenal winning the game, just saying both teams to score now, no, just in case there's kind of the variable that sometimes comes into these one-off matches, especially at the start of a campaign like this, where there can be kind of, quirky things can happen. So Arsenal might be in control, be defensively solid, but Atalanta just get something. So I'm going to go just to be safe on it, because I think this makes it a much better bet, given that the price is higher as well, or still high. Atalanta Arsenal BTTS no.
2.26 that price. And Adrian, final one to you: Milan versus Liverpool.
Yeah, I like this one. It's the one we started the show with. Liverpool double chance and under 3.5 goals. All the boys, we're all in agreement that this wouldn't be a high-scoring game. But that Liverpool are obviously the team with more pedigree. Liverpool, Chelsea, Newcastle have all gone to the San Siro in recent years in the Champions League, and this has landed. They've come away unscathed, haven't lost the game, and they've been under 3.5 goals. I think that slot will go pretty controlled here, not give very much away, and that they should win the game low scoring. In a low scoring match, but this also covers the 0-0 or the 1-1 draw as well, doesn't it? I just think that Milan will fall short against a team like Liverpool, but they can make it competitive enough. So yeah, Liverpool double chance, under 3.5, 2.1.
Okay, that is our Champions League opening podcast. My thanks to Mark, Adrian, Miguel. Don't forget the £5 podcast treble. Money back is a free bet if it loses. Manchester City to win, both teams to score, and Haaland to score at around 3.9 currently on Matchbook. Myself, Mark, and Adrian will be back on Thursday before, obviously, the final round of final day of Champions League match day 1. But looking forward to that. Enjoy the week's football. We'll chat to you back on Thursday. Bye-bye.